Welcome to this edition of True Crime with the Sarge. I'm your host, Joseph Giacalone, and with me tonight we have two very special guests. We're going to start with the man you see in the middle there, Matt McMahon. He and Rachel had their eldest daughter, Faye, and the man on the right is a second-time offender here, Tim Pappa. Tim, welcome to the show. Gentlemen,
Hey,
thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate that. We have a tough subject to cover, but it's very important because I want to keep this case in the public eye, and that's something really important. So I hope you gentlemen are doing well tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having the show, and I'm definitely doing well. It's a beautiful day here.
Very
yeah,
good.
thanks for having me too.
Yeah, sure thing, Tim. Matt, I'd like to start with you. Could you tell us about Rachel? So, we rarely get a chance or a glimpse into who she was and, what she liked to do. And you had shared a
hmm
little tidbit about, the flowers. If you could share that with the audience too, that'd be great.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I was telling Joe that in chat you're likely going to see orange hearts, and I can already see the orange hearts there. And the reason that they are orange is Rachel. She When I was with Rachel, she told me that her favorite flowers were orange roses. She bought them quite a lot. I bought them for her. But after Rachel's passing, I was talking with her second daughter, who is now 14. She had a birthday in April. She told me that she knew Rachel to have her favorite flower as a tiger lily. And that was also an orange flower. And it's definitely understandable that somebody's favorite flower can change over the years, but they were both orange. So I had taken it to believe that orange may be her favorite color. Somebody had asked what her favorite color was, and that's how I determined orange. So it's common for people to flood chat with orange hearts for Rachel.
Very good. I know you and your family and your daughter and the other kids are having a really tough time with the subjects going on. And how well have you been able to cope with all of this?
Uh, I feel like I cope better when I'm doing something about the case, either canvassing or I'm talking to detectives and getting updates or going on a show and talking about it. And I tend to do worse when nothing's going on. I'm not working on anything. I'm not talking with anybody about the case. I'm not giving any updates because then I can start to feel a bit despondent and hopeless that this guy's going to be caught. Uh, but deep down, I do know that this guy absolutely is going to be caught. Um, I think it's absolutely just a matter of time, and I can get into that. I don't want to jump the gun a little bit, but I
Okay,
can get into that a little bit later.
very good. Tim, I'd like to get you in here. Tim, we know that you have this unique idea of this content creation, and you've been helping out the family and
Hmm.
putting out some of these videos out there. There are links to the videos in the show notes, and also Matt had shared with me his flyers. They are in a file on the show notes also, so you could download them, you could share them on your social media posts. I figured it'd be easier for everyone to do that, so that you had one place to find all these things. So Tim, the content creation that you do, could you explain it for those that might not know you or seeing you the first time you were in the show?
Sure. I mean, I started um, supporting cold cases when I was still with the FBI with the Behavioral Analysis Unit, and one way I did that was still applying behavioral analysis, but to content creation. So instead of what a lot of people might be used to, which is you'll see videos out there by law enforcement agencies, usually something like we're looking for tips or information, please come forward, or it would be a video of like a press conference. That's pretty traditional, and that's just a necessary component of communicating information about the case. But the approach we tried to take and the approach I take now with Matt and his family and the Morins is creating content that we hope will drive some kind of response from different audiences. And audiences could be the offender responsible for this. It could be his family and friends. It could be people who saw something or know something and they haven't felt motivated or they haven't really realized that maybe they should come forward yet. And so this is behaviorally based content. We make it with a purpose to not just make people think and feel things, but to actually nudge and drive behavior. And in this case, it's a matter of trying to message or communicate to these audiences so that they'll come forward, or that maybe a family member of the offender will be that much more willing to share information. There could be a lot of goals. It's definitely difficult with if you're just working with the family of a victim, because there's going to be limits, right, to the information you have. But it's still effective, and especially in this case, working with Matt and his family and other family members in the morning, like when they are vulnerable and real on camera, people respond to that. So that goes into the creation of this kind of content, and then we see that kind of response from people too, because they respond to it when they feel like this person's being genuine. Even if I haven't been in their shoes, I can feel some of what they're feeling. So that's what's behind creating this kind of content.
Yeah, it's excellent. And like I said, all the links for it, and the Nightbot will be giving out all those links also too. So if you miss it on the show notes, you'll get it right here in the chat. Matt, one of the complaints that I always hear from family members is a lack of communication from the police department to the victims' families. Have you experienced anything good or bad in that respect?
I've experienced extremely good communication.
Excellent.
One thing that if there is anybody that watches this that's also in a similar situation as me, one thing that I would encourage people to do is become educated about true crime, detective work, the case, so that you can ask very specific and direct questions to the detectives. Because I personally found that I received the best information when I asked a very specific question to them, and then I would get usually back a very specific and direct answer. Um, so they have been very good with keeping us in the loop and giving us detailed information, letting us know what they're doing, what their approach is, the resources that they're allocating, and they've been extremely timely in their responses. I can send them a text or an email, and usually get a response the same day within a couple of hours. Assuming I pick a good time to do it. I usually choose like maybe a Tuesday or Wednesday. Friday evening, probably not the best time to do it. But they're great.
Right, your timing is everything. Well, that's good to hear, because I said that's the number one complaint that I always hear about that. And when so when you're dealing with the police in certain aspects, you're basically learning how to the jargon, right? You're learning how to do
Mhm.
things, and you found that has been helpful.
Yeah. Well, and thankfully, I have like experts like Tim, and there's a couple of other profilers and retired FBI agents that have helped and said these are good questions to ask. Ask them, are they doing this? Because if they're not, they should be. And one of the things that I would like to say is every question that I've asked of the detectives of, are you doing this? And they should have been doing that. The answer has always been that they are doing that, or they looked into it. And this is the reason that they didn't pursue that avenue. So in this case specifically, anything that you can think that they should be doing, they have already done, they're doing it, or that there's a specific reason why another avenue is a better avenue. I do see a lot of comments online saying, well, why don't they do this? They should be doing this, or they're not doing a good job because they didn't do that yet. And most of those comments are off base.
Right. And I'm sure that's frustrating. We're going to circle back to that, but I wanted to ask Tim a question. Tim, as you're creating this content and you're getting there, could you just explain to the audience exactly how that works in regards to creating the specific type of content that tries to elicit a behavioral response, basically, from either the suspect or the families of the suspects and that kind of thing?
Sure. I mean, I guess if you as an example, when I was still with the FBI with the behavioral analysis unit, there would be other cases where we had a pretty good idea of who the actual offender was and who they knew. And so when you know that, you have a much better idea of how to craft a message and content that you believe people will actually respond to, because you're making it for them essentially, right? It's like you think about marketing or advertising agencies, they're reaching out to broad audiences, but if they know who their target audience is and what kind of things they like, they can craft it to make that audience very responsive to it. In this situation where we don't know who the offender is, the main goal of those interactions when I'm creating that content with Matt and his family members is just to show them, feature them to audiences that are watching as genuine, authentic people, because there's so many cold cases out there. There's so many homicides out there. Um, the idea here is to keep people's attention and keep them focused on this, especially as there's updates in the case and there's new information and new things maybe that people hadn't considered. That's the goal. Keep their attention, and part of that is starting to build some kind of relationship between the family members and the public. Even if the public doesn't know them, they get a sense of them, they get a slice of them when they're watching that content. So that content doesn't always have to be necessarily emotional, but it usually is. And the idea is to bring the audience to wherever, say, Matt is. I think one of the videos was actually walking the trail with Matt, where he thinks the offender may have been hiding to watch Rachel. And that's really important because people never get to really see that stuff. They're highly dependent on what news media decides to feature or make. But this is something that's much more informal and genuine. So those are the moments I'm trying to capture when I'm with Matt and members of the Morin family as well, and share that with the public. But of course, as you're doing that, you're also intentionally or unintentionally sending messages to the offender and that person's family and friends, because it might display progress in the case, and that's concerning for an offender when they're trying to decide what they're going to do next.
Right. Matt, I know you've been on a number of shows now. Of course, the mainstream media, we know it's still really important. But listen, we know that social media can be, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so to speak.
Mhm.
What's your advice for other family members going through what you're going through? Because you seem to be pretty strong on this kind of topic and pretty strong on this situation, and you're keeping yourself together. But not everybody can do that. Could you tell us a little bit about, maybe what gets you through some of this stuff? Because I've seen some stuff online that you just kind of shake your head.
Sure. Well, very early on, in some of these Facebook groups and and other social media discussion areas about the case, I struggled a little bit with the interaction that I was seeing, and I did speak with somebody who runs another true crime show. I honestly don't even remember what it was, and they gave me the feedback is that um, you can't win an argument with the internet. So it's like you can't try to battle the people that want to fight. So it took me a little bit of time to really realize that of how great advice that was. But now if I see somebody that's trolling and trying to make a negative comment or just being hostile, I usually just block them and move on. It's if you don't want to help try to find the suspect and you just want to create drama, then you don't need to be part of the narrative that I am in. I'm not going to give them my attention. Um, but I would say just don't give them your attention. Just maybe block them or just ignore them and just move on. Focus on the people that care and have compassion and are motivated to find the person, and the other people they just need to be left to the side.
Have you found that the traditional media, let's call them the news stations, the TV news, the cable news, they kind of like ebb and flow with this case? Like, I know February when they came out with the new, sketch, but then it seemed to be like nothing around, right? I mean, is that frustrating?
Um, it can be frustrating. It can be particularly frustrating when there's specific information that I want to put out there, but then you have the news outlet not wanting to put the information out there because they're worried. It's like, well, is the sheriff's department not going to be happy if I say this? It's like, in April, I was doing some canvassing and I gave an interview to a local outlet. They've been very supportive, so I don't want to name them, but I wanted to give them a detailed description of what the suspect looked like the day that he killed Rachel, and they didn't want to put it on the air because they were worried that they might cross the line with the sheriff's department. But I think that's extremely important information to have out there, because if somebody in the neighborhood I was canvassing saw the suspect, they're not going to know it unless they know what they're looking for. So that was frustrating. But yeah, I could definitely see that media is losing attention. It can become a little bit frustrating, it can become a little bit worrying, especially since I've been told that as soon as you hit the 1 year mark, that's pretty much when media moves on. They find another case to follow. So I am concerned about the 1 year mark rapidly approaching. We're already past 10 months.
Right, yeah, we just passed 10 months. August 6th, right, was the day that she went missing.
That was when she was found.
That's when she found.
Yeah, she went for her run on the Monpa Trail around 7 p.m. on Saturday, August 5th. And it was 1:07 the following day that a 911 call went in by two people that found her in that tunnel.
All right, Tim, when you're dealing with families specifically, what are some of the measures that you have to take? That I know empathy is definitely one of them, but what is some of the well, listen, we know you're very easy to speak with, right? You're easy to talk to. We get that, but what are some of the kind of, I guess, cues that you can give families that you're really here to help, that you're not here to take advantage?
I think anytime you can be as transparent as possible, right? The more information people have, they tend to be able to make their own decisions and feel like they make their own decisions. I mean, even if you consider very difficult interviews with subjects of investigations, oftentimes, even though it seems counterintuitive, being relatively transparent up front can make a difference, because I think whoever you're speaking to is looking to see if they can trust you to be genuine with them. And I think if there are things that you can't be completely open about, then I think just explaining that, I think that's the key. There's certainly been many times in the past in the FBI where it's like members of the family were persons of interest, and so that's much more delicate, right? Trying to manage those relationships, because even if someone's a person of interest, doesn't mean they're still culpable or responsible for it. But in situations where it's very clear the family's not involved, yeah, I think a lot of times explaining things, because I think lack of information about what steps you're taking, the processes that you're involved in, how long it might take, why you're doing this, as much as you reasonably can. I think that makes a difference to families. I've seen it make a difference, because a lot of times the biggest grievance, understandably, is when there's a lack of information for some families. And I think that can create issues of trust. If a law enforcement agency is doing their due diligence to try and track this down, but obviously investigations are incredibly difficult and sensitive, and there's a lot of things to weigh. But when there's a lack of communication with the family, yeah, I've seen it many times. It starts to fester, this idea that that law enforcement agency is keeping information from the family, and that's a little difficult to overcome. So yeah, transparency, I would say, as reasonably as possible, is probably the best thing, the best approach to take with any family who's also going through a process of grieving and hurting.
Right. I mean, it's a great
Yeah.
lesson for police departments too. Matt, so they have a contingent, I believe, of 3 detectives still actively working this case, correct? Is that
Yeah,
what you believe?
yeah,
And
it
the
was
fact,
about a month ago. I had asked if, because at the point of me asking, I thought it was actually only one dedicated detective, and the response came back. They even listed the names of 3 detectives that are working full time, dedicated to this case, with other detectives lending a hand as needed,
right,
which
so
is extraordinary.
which is, especially for a small department like they have, you could see in a much bigger police department that they can have that kind of personnel. So that's a great thing that they are actually putting the resources to this. And I'm assuming it's the same detectives that started on the case.
That's correct. It's the
Right.
same lead detective, the same detective that I met that Sunday when I showed up at the trailhead to find out what was going on and start searching the trail. It's the same guy running the investigation today as the very first minute.
All right, that's excellent that the continuity is there too, because I've seen this kind of fray sometimes when you got a case that's now 10 months old, getting to the thing, and sometimes police departments say, all right, we need to put our resources somewhere else. So I was happy to hear that. I know a lot of the talk online, they talk about, this guy ran to the, over the border and he's this and that. We hear about all those things, and I'm sure even from yourself, because we're not going to get into what the police know or what have you,
Mhm.
but just from the family member's point of view, some of these things that they say can be hurtful too in regards to that. And we want people to kind of check themselves sometimes, or at least
Well,
I do.
for me, it's not hurtful, but it can be frustrating because if you have somebody who is quite adamant that the suspect is illegal and may have crossed the border, the frustration comes in is that if you're focusing on that group, you're limiting it that much, you're probably or possibly eliminating the suspect from the suspect pool. And you can't really eliminate people from the suspect pool unless you have something solid to say it's not this person. Like, say, for example, we know that we can remove all women, but you can't go with what country he's a citizen of, because we don't have that 100%. And as of right now, the only thing that anybody could use to indicate that he's illegal is the fact that he's Hispanic, which you can't tell what country somebody's a citizen of based upon their ethnicity. So that's not something good to go on either. So I would prefer people not to go that route, because I don't want them to eliminate the suspect that they're looking for.
Right. It also is people jumping the gun on that. Just because he's Hispanic doesn't mean that he's here illegally.
Right.
So that's the point that I was trying
Yeah.
to make in regards to that. Tim, I mean, as a former law enforcement officer like yourself too, I mean, this kind of stuff is frustrating, right? When you're working the case and people are saying stuff in the public that is not true, and you kind of want to lose your mind, so to speak.
Yeah. No, I mean, even from my position on this case, whenever I can provide support to Matt's family and the Morin family, I'm frustrated too, for the same reasons that Matt said. I know everybody probably has an opinion about who they think is responsible, but especially coming from a background where it's going to be law enforcement experience, but also some of the behavioral frameworks for analysis that we'd use in terms of offenders' decision making. Yeah, it takes a lot to cut through those ideas and those opinions, because we don't know how much influence that actually also has on people who might have information, and even investigators. That's something that isn't always really talked about, but investigators out there, generally speaking, they watch the news too. They watch podcasts too. And of course, they're going to apply their investigative discipline to whatever they're doing. But people have biases, and they do get influenced by it. So that is always a difficult thing to navigate through. And whenever you can actually point to something that is factual, now you have some progress in the case. But yeah, I share the frustration, and I can only imagine the frustration truly that Matt feels when it's like, obviously the goal here is to find who did this and bring justice in this case.
Well,
Right.
if I could just add on to that a little bit,
Sure.
my frustration ends up growing when I try to point this out to somebody and then they keep pushing back. It's almost like they have a vested interest that the person has to be here illegally, when I just want them to focus on the known facts of the case so that we can actually catch this guy, instead of going off on tangents and distractions.
Right. And what I was going to follow that up with is that, from a former, case investigator myself, let's just say, for argument's sake, that he was here illegally. When you start throwing that stuff out there, this community already has a fear of the police, and they don't want to cooperate because they're worried about the deportation and everything else that goes along with it. You're actually making law enforcement's job tougher. Every time somebody comes on the TV and says, well, I think he's from XY country, and I just kind of shake my head and say, first of all, you don't know what you're talking about. And the second thing is, even if you're right, you're making law enforcement's job harder and more difficult. And that's what we want to stop.
Yeah.
And that's why I brought it up, because not even to put anybody on the spot, but after a point, it's just beyond frustrating that you keep on hearing this stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree. We need to create an environment where everybody feels safe to come forward to give the information that they have. And I'll give you a very specific example about this. There's somebody that is connected to my daughter and friends of my daughter that came to the country legally and believes that she saw the suspect along the trail 3 separate times prior to Rachel's murder. She married a U.S. citizen. They never followed through with the paperwork. So now she's here illegally, and she's afraid to talk with the police. And today she still has not spoken to the police. And I can't make that connection because she's afraid that she's going to get deported. But the information that I heard indirectly from her, if I knew her identity, I would give it to the police so they can make the connection and get the information. But the information I heard indirectly from her had details that are not publicly known about the suspect. So I have complete confidence that she legitimately saw this suspect, but she's afraid to talk to the police.
And that kind of validates what I said in regards to that, because,
Yeah.
you know, and it's just frustrating beyond belief, because I've experienced this with some of our cases in New York City, where people have the answers, and you go into those communities and everybody just runs from you. Nobody wants to talk to you. Everyone's afraid of you. And we used to have to go in there and say, listen, we don't care why you're here or what's going on. All we're looking for, we'd show a photograph, or whatever. This is all we want. But unfortunately, you can't get that fear from them, because they're worried about, specifically the police maybe back in their own country might be brutal beyond belief, and they're afraid of that also. Tim, how do we kind of, as former law enforcement, how do we kind of prevent some of this stuff from happening in regards to this stuff leaking out in these cases?
Well, I think the example that Matt gave, it's a tough position for him, because you hear details like that, and it's like that can make a difference, but there's this dynamic that seems impossible to break through, because all these factors people are trying to like leverage and feel comfortable with. I think one thing we try to do, at least one thing we can do, is try to give as much attention as we can to the information we can share. Right. I think the best example of that was recently with Matt canvassing those neighborhoods. That's something he decided to do. I thought his whole approach was very sound. I thought his rationale and reasoning for where this offender may have gone had behavioral basis to it. And that's an example of like we can feature that, we can make content from it as well. Andy's going to try and talk to people in that neighborhood who might know something. And there might be limits to it, but that's important to do. Nobody's waiting for traditional news media to cover that. And no one's necessarily waiting for a law enforcement agency to do the same thing. I think the fact that he's taking a role like that actively is some of the best things you can do. I think that's also actually important for audiences to see that too. Whoever those audiences are, I think seeing family members who are committed in that vein is important for some people to really demonstrate that they're not going to stop it. It's very different, not to take anything away from, senior law enforcement officials who will stand at a press conference and say, "We'll never forget. We're not going to give up on this." I know they mean that, but there's something different about a family member who's lost somebody, who's saying, "I'm taking this into my own hands. I'm going to do everything I can." That's also got to be unnerving to an offender, because more than likely they're watching these things because they want to know what people know, and to see family members who won't stop, that's still got to be stressful for them, even if they're capable of doing some of the things they've done. So I think that's one of the best things that, as former law enforcement officers, and also any way we can support the family, when the family takes that kind of action, it's really important.
Yep, excellent point. Matt, now you took it upon yourself to do this canvassing, handing out the flyers, and you
Mhm.
just basically were going door to door. Are you hanging them up in certain locations too, in the stores and that kind of thing?
Well, what Tim's talking about is my most recent canvassing. In the fall of last year, I did organize 3 different canvassing events. In that, we did have volunteers that went out to the various neighborhoods and also hung them up in stores. At this point, it does seem like stores have kind of lost interest in having flyers hung up. They've pulled them down. But in the canvassing that Tim was referring to, I've been knocking on the doors and trying to interact with each individual household. I found that engaging with them directly was yielding much better results than just leaving a flyer in the mailbox. Oftentimes when I was knocking on the door and talking with individuals, I would find myself standing there for sometimes 20 minutes, just having a long discussion. And I did feel that from them, they were surprised to hear that I had a connection, that I'm knocking on the door, and it's my mother's daughter that was, murdered just a quarter of a mile away from their home. And a lot of the people did start giving me information. I passed it on to the sheriff's department. Most of the information that I received the sheriff's department already had, but there was some information that they didn't have. So far, it hasn't panned out. The information that I gave them hasn't resulted in a solid lead, but they at least followed it. And it's one more lead that they followed that's going to take us to the guy. I know that you can feel frustrated when you have a lead that doesn't lead to the suspect, but the way that I see it is it's one more lead that's taking me closer to catching the guy. And I do believe that we're going to catch the guy. And I think we'll possibly even catch the guy this year. I think it's just a matter of time.
Well, that's excellent news. I hope so too. I mean, this is a case that I've been following. I said last August, I just happened to go take a ride down there, take a look for myself. I just happened to be there the day that they were doing the memorial service, just to get a feel for it myself, because this was a situation where Rachel's on her jog like many other women we've seen, and just becomes a victim of opportunity. Which was something that I had spoken about on television, and kind of get into arguments with people who saying that, of course, it's always the ex-husband or boyfriend that's involved in some of these things. But I kind of explained to people why I didn't think so at the time. I thought there were plenty of clues, from it. But that's a whole other contention. That's people in my own field that I have the problems with. But so Matt, like, what do you think the next steps are for yourself and the family to try to keep this case going? In the media, keeping fresh sets of eyes on this thing. What is their plan?
I'm not sure about a plan. I mean, it's after you reach the 10-month mark, you've kind of already done everything that you can think of, because when something like this happens, you immediately you almost go frantic in your mind, thinking about what can I do to catch this guy, because of the pain that you're feeling, the pain that you see that's happening to your own daughter, your daughter's siblings, other loved ones, other friends. So at this point, I feel like I've done everything that I can think to do, aside from continuing to engage with the public through shows like you or the local media to keep people interested in the case. I know it doesn't sound good saying it, but that's exactly what it is. And the only other thing that I can think to do is just try to give out little bits of information that's not going to compromise the case, which is one of the things that I did in the most recent video I worked with Tim on, where I gave a more detailed description of what the suspect looked like and the direction he very likely moved after the attack, just to try to give those details to the people in the right location and hopefully generate a tip. But I would like to add one other piece of clarification. The reason I feel that we could potentially catch him this year is, in the world we live in today, it's next to impossible to disappear. We're leaving breadcrumbs to each and every one of us everywhere, every day. It's not like we're back in the 1800s where you just walk off in the woods and you're gone. Today's day and age, you're leaving lines back to you everywhere.
Yep. And I'm going to get to you in a second, Tim. I just wanted to ask Matt one more question. How is Faye, your daughter, holding up during all of this?
That's a tough one, because she unfortunately takes after me in this regard, where we both tend to internalize things a lot. So I don't see a lot of emotional response from her about this right now, except in moments maybe like when she's going to visit her mother on Mother's Day. I think she's doing the best that she can. I mean, there's some other things that are going on that's giving her some joy and giving her a distraction. But each of the kids actually handle it in a very different way. I know that they're all struggling with it. They just handle it and show it differently, just because they're all different people,
No, I understand that. Tim, what do you think? Like, for instance, are you working with the police department, trying to get some of this information out there? Or you're just doing this for the family?
Just for the family, yeah.
What are some of the things that the police department, and not so much even the sheriff's office here, but other police departments, to get cold case information out there better, right? Instead of just standing there and say, on such and such a date, this is what happened. Can you give them some tips about maybe trying to get a different point of view on this, to try to get more tips and leads to help solve this
Sure.
case and others?
I think there's always going to be some component to a cold case where you want to communicate information, but you want something back from it. I think thinking about it from that perspective, like we don't just want to put out information, we want to elicit some kind of response, we want to drive some kind of behavior. I think it's thinking through what's that behavior, right? It might be a situation where it's like there are people in a family that know someone's responsible for something. So maybe it makes a difference who you actually have speak about that, who you actually have on camera, if that's what your approach is. Maybe it makes a difference to have an investigator walk through a crime scene and maybe not share everything, but share enough that the offender watching that starts to get an impression that they know more than I thought. And all that kind of stuff can influence someone's decision making. I know that sounds abstract to a lot of people, maybe. Like, how do you measure that? The research is there, the empirical study of how audiences respond to information and content. It's there. I think a lot of this comes down to having actual design in mind when you're trying to communicate. I'll give you an example. The first time I did this was years ago, but it was in a cold case homicide from 2000. And one of the goals, there are many goals, but one of the goals was to familiarize a community with this case because it had been 20 years. There's new people there, to remind people who had been there growing up before investigators started canvassing. And so instead of relying on traditional means such as having press conferences and things like that, we made a few very short videos in that community featuring different people in the family. We didn't pay for any advertising, they just put it on their Facebook page, ran those for a week. And in that demographic, in that community, as we expected, it hit the demographic we were looking for on Facebook, had something like 40,000 views in a week and 8,000 engagements. And engagements is what matters, right? People sharing and liking.
Yep.
So by the time investigators did start canvassing and doing interviews, literally everyone had mentioned those videos. And so one goal out of many was to get people familiar with it, but also prepare them so they're expecting law enforcement officers to come through that neighborhood. They understand why they're there. And the other goal there is also if there is a person of interest in that neighborhood, they're going to start thinking about it and they're going to start perhaps changing the way they make their decisions because they also know people are going to come around and start asking questions. So that's an example of being very proactive in your design. You're not just putting out information, but you actually want a result. You're trying to meet some objective, and those were some of the objectives. Those are actually very simple, low cost things that any law enforcement agency can do. Because at this point, most law enforcement agencies have some kind of public relations component, and everyone's cameras these days have a digital component. So it's a very practical approach. If you want to think about it that way, they can all do that.
Pretty good ideas there. But Matt, how have you been using the power of social media to try to get some of the information out for yourself and for your family?
Engaging with people on social media. If I see somebody make a post or ask a question, I try to answer the question. Or if I see somebody putting out information that is not factual, I try to correct them, in a positive way, not, trying to beat them down.
Right.
And just sharing the information and just engagement. I mean, I think engagement is the key. It's the same focus that I did with the canvassing, is just trying to engage.
Right.
I feel like people are more vested when they see that I'm engaging with them directly when I'm connected to Rachel through my daughter.
I hear you. And when the new sketch came out, I think it was in February the new sketch came out.
Yeah, February. Yeah.
Right. So the new February for the sketch came out, and there was a lot of excitement around the case, right? Because I think
Mhm.
people thought that the police were focusing it in there. What kind of range of emotions does that kind of take or toll on the family? Because we have to be mindful of that too when these stuff comes out. I know they probably spoke to you ahead of time, but still, there's still got to be a hit, so to speak, when you see this get put on the television.
Well, actually, I didn't know that they were releasing that sketch until after it was released. They let me know at like 9 a.m. that they were releasing the sketch. I knew that they were working on a sketch because Faye and I went and took a look at one of the early sketches back in probably about the middle of December. They were spending a lot of time refining it to make sure that this was a really good sketch. And if you look at it, I think you would agree it's a really good sketch and a very accurate sketch, because you really don't get any do-overs with the sketch. You can't put the sketch out there and then a month later say, you know what, the sketch is wrong. It's really going to be this one, because then you've lost all trust from anybody who's listening to the police department. So I knew that they were close to releasing the sketch. I just didn't know that it was going to be that specific day, but I was happy that they did it. And it might sound a little bit strange to the people that are watching, but there wasn't a lot of emotional response from me, just because I've learned that I need to temper the ups and downs. Because early on, like when they found the DNA link to the guy in LA, I was like laying in bed watching TV when I got the news. I sat straight up and my heart started racing and I became excited. I was like, they're going to catch this guy. And I realized that I can't go between that high and the depressive lows if I'm going to survive this. So I try to stay in the middle. And I don't think it's really going to change a whole lot for me personally until they catch the guy. When they catch the guy, my heartbeat's probably going to, explode again. And yeah.
No, I hear you. I know one of the points of contention on a lot of people online is the LA case, right? There's so many questions about that. We know that there's no connection in regards to what happened to Rachel per se, other than you have the same suspect in
Correct.
regards to that, and they have the DNA. How does law enforcement, how have they been handling that situation with LA? Because listen, very little information has come out on that, which has led to a lot of speculation. And it was one of the things that I said you have to be mindful of when police departments don't let out information. How have you measured that kind of response from the police department in regards to LA?
Well, I know that Harford County Sheriff's Department has worked very closely with LA in a number of ways that haven't always been publicized, because they've been out to LA a number of times to work on the case. And of course, if they're going to do that, they need the assistance of the LAPD. It's tough to really, I believe the LAPD, they've given every last piece of detailed information that they have about the suspect to the Harford County Sheriff's Department. But unfortunately, because of the crime that they had at that time and the volume of crime that they have, I don't think that they realized how dangerous of an attacker had attacked them. So they didn't have the same level of investigation that they had over here at Harford County. And it's not like you can really go back and redo a lot of these things when it was like, 4 months later, because it was like the end of March to the beginning of August.
Right. Yeah, no, and listen, coming from a big police department, some of these cases do get lost in the shuffle because of so many things going on. But unfortunately, when you have a companion case like this clear across the other country, then all of a sudden all the bells and whistles going off on that.
Yeah, now, I don't think there's anything else that the LAPD can do to drive this case forward, aside from trying to get the word out a little bit more into that neighborhood. But it's a difficult neighborhood to get the word out into, because it's about a high crime, a high gang activity neighborhood, as you can imagine, out there in LA. So they're not exactly receptive to law enforcement. At one point, Tim had actually made a suggestion that me and Rachel's brother, Michael Morin, go out to that neighborhood and do some canvassing. And I had mentioned it to the sheriff's department. They said, if you do that, reach out to the LAPD and get an escort, because the detectives that go into that neighborhood don't go there without an escort. So,
yes, nice, right? So,
yeah,
that's something to consider too in regards to doing all that stuff. And I understand that it is probably a good idea per se, but we have to also make sure to include your safety and the safety of everybody else should you go there. So if you already know that going in. So, on Tim, have you reached out to LA at all, or are you planning on reaching out to LA at all? See if you can get some of your services, because the internet and videos don't have to worry about bringing escorts into neighborhoods.
I haven't. I mean, um, this is the first case that I provided some kind of support on since I transitioned out of the FBI. So it's been a very different experience for me because these cases before, yeah, I would interact with family members, but it'd be for a brief period of time. Really, I was directly supporting that state and local law enforcement agency. So this is different. This is a different experience. It's definitely broadened my perspective of all these different things that over a period of time family members are going through, and how the relationship might look a little bit different from their perspective, how the media is handling it, how the public's handling it, how law enforcement's handling it. I've really tried to maintain a deferential place because I don't want to also, dislodge things in an investigation that I don't have insight into. And I've really just kind of stuck to any way I can support Matt and his family and the Morin family, then I'll do that. If they had reached out, I'd be willing to help, of course. But yeah, that's really been the position I've tried to stay in.
Right. So if you're just joining us now, we have Matt McMahon. He is the father of Rachel Morin's eldest daughter, Faye. And we also have retired FBI profiler Tim Pappa here, and we're discussing Rachel Morin and her case and the suspect right now. So if you're just joining us now, over 300 people in the room watching this live. There are all the links to all of the social media pages for both gentlemen in the show notes, and they're also being given out in the comment section. And of course, Tim's website or YouTube page, excuse me, Storytellers Design. The link is in there, and all these videos with Matt and other family members are on that page, and you should take a look at those. Matt, as this case is still progressing forward, which is something that I'm glad to hear about all these different things. I know you're dealing with other family members and children and the like. How are you keeping this kind of all together in your own kind of mind, so to speak, and keeping yourself focused and moving forward? Because I think that's a question that pops up in the comment section, like how are you dealing with this and how is it affecting you?
Well, the way that it's affecting me is it's taken over my life. It's something that I've thought about every day, almost all day since this has happened. So it's not how do I cope with this, it's how do I remember to do everything else that I'm supposed to be doing, which can be really difficult. I mean, even a simple task like just driving somebody somewhere can be difficult for me because I can be driving down the highway and realize I'm not paying attention to where I'm driving because I'm thinking about the case.
Right.
So it's, my life has become this, not only because I owe it to Rachel, but also for my daughter and the other kids. I'm still managing to keep everything else together. It's a challenge, and I just need to keep reminding myself that I need to go to work every day. It's like I need to clean the house. I need to go do this for my daughter. In terms of the case, that's an automatic thing because I can't stop. I mean, even if I wanted to stop, I can't. It just keeps flooding into my head.
Right. So we hope that you can keep that together because many of us don't know exactly what you're going through, and that's what I hope that people on social media and the true crime community understand that too, and give you a little bit of a break when it comes to that. Tim, when law enforcement is looking into these cases and we're putting out these videos, how do we harness all of that information? Because I've seen some different things. Like I know we have a Metro Crime Stoppers reward. How do we make sure that the information gets to the right people within the department?
Yeah, I mean, one step that a conversation we would always have when we'd be working with like state and local partners is we really need to centralize um, where information is going to go to. Because I'm sure you've seen plenty of flyers and requests for information where you'll have different agencies, different forms of communication or contact.
Different
Um,
phone numbers.
yeah. So we want to simplify it as much as we can to make that step a little bit easier because that step is very hard for some people to make. And it's also important, right, in terms of like the information coming in, and to be consistent, right? Because it could be years that go by in some cases. And if people are still relying on numbers or email addresses to contact if they have information. Certainly, leads have come in years later that are important in cases. And it's also very important, of course, to really focus on like who's really the lead in this, and of course, the sheriff's office is in this case. But a lot of that communication is also still about building trust in that investigating agency. Um, I think you both have obviously made reference to it tonight, but people being willing to come forward, they've got to trust who they're coming forward to, because there's a measure of investment if you do that, right? If you solve something or if you know who's responsible for this, that could end up being something where you're testifying against someone in court. And so all those things are very difficult for people. When people even offer money for a reward for information, yeah, that can be an important motivator, but ultimately that's not also always driving people. There's got to be other reasons that are driving them. And those are some of the things we're also trying to appeal to in this content that I'm making with the family, which is these are people just like you and me, and this can happen to anybody, and this has happened to them, and this is their journey through this, and this should never happen to anybody. And that's why you should come forward. That's why you should share this information, even if you don't know how it fits in, maybe it doesn't fit in, and you should trust that law enforcement agency that they're going to handle that correctly and appropriately. So all those things are kind of at play in that dynamic, but it kind of starts with being clear and consistent with who they should reach out to and why.
Yes, because, and I've written about this in my first textbook, and I've mentioned this several times when I do my own trainings. One point of contact, because why? People get, people retire, people move on, people get fired, people quit, people die, people, and police departments, this stuff gets lost. And now all of a sudden, like you said, 10 months later, a year later, a tip comes in and that cell phone is sitting in a drawer somewhere that nobody's using anymore. And that is something that, I'm not saying that's happening in this case, but it's something to think about as we put out this information and being able to get it out there to make sure that we have that one point of contact. That's just something to think about.
Yeah, thankfully
Matt.
in this case, they did set up a dedicated phone line, a dedicated email account specifically for this case.
Very good. And would you be able to give us that right now? Do you have the email offhand?
Sure. I think, actually, I'm going to read it because this is not something I want to get wrong.
Okay.
So it's rmtips@harfordsheriff.org, and the phone number is 410-836-7788. It is on the flyers that are linked in the description of this show.
Very good. Yes. And those, they're right there in the show notes. You go down there, you can download all that information. Make sure you have it. As we're closing up in the last few minutes, Matt, we want to end on a good note.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that you have some good news to share with the audience.
I do. And I know I didn't ask you this ahead of time, but would you be willing to play that one video that I linked? It's like a 60-second video, and I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Unfortunately, I
can
won't
probably
be able to
get it and give you.
Can you?
Let me find it real quick, and because I feel like that would be a very profound way to.
Unfortunately, I am on my iPad and I don't have the ability to share that video on this thing, but I think you could share it on your end. I could give access to it if you have it.
Oh, I can definitely get up the link real quick. I'm sorry for your audience for having to wait for this, but
no, that's okay.
I think once you see it, okay. So I do have the link. I'm just not sure how to do it, but that's not it.
Tim, as Matt's working on that,
I have the link. I just don't know how to play it.
I will post it on the show notes. I won't be able to.
Okay, I did link it in our private chat here. If you can play it from there or no,
I'll see. Nope, you lost me there. So no, that whole thing. Sorry. I was
Okay, well,
unable
I'm
to
just going to
get the.
post it in chat. If people want to
Okay.
watch that,
Yeah, I'm gonna
that
make sure they see that.
is a video that Tim filmed of my daughter Faye. That's the only interview Faye has given to anybody, and it actually took a while for Faye to feel comfortable to speak with somebody because she internalizes so much, and Tim spoke with her, had exchanges back and forth for weeks, and a Zoom call to give her the comfort level to speak with her. So she met with Tim and me at the location where Rachel's house was. It's since been demolished by the landlord, so it's just an empty lot. And in it, Faye talks about moments that have been taken from her by this killer, about how she's never going to be able to go, to her wedding or meet her kids. She's not going to be able to go to Rachel's wedding. And one of those moments is going to happen this year. And it's quite sad that Rachel's not going to be here to meet her granddaughter.
Well, congratulations on that aspect of it, and we are definitely happy that you are going to be a grandfather. And thank you for sharing that with us. Tim, as we're just winding this down, what's the next step in your campaign? Let's call it. How do we turn up the heat here?
I think if there's a development in the case, and we can kind of concentrate and focus that messaging, then it'd be time to make content again. I mean, there are other people in, say, the Morin family that I've had some conversations with, but we haven't made those videos yet. And part of it is because we have to think about, like, what will this contribute to this effort, right? All of it might contribute in ways we don't know, but I think that's what I'm looking for, and for developments in the case. And then I think, but in the meantime, still as willing as they are to share, to document and share with people what Matt and his family and the Morin family are going through. It just, yes, there are a lot of homicides out there and a lot of people who have lost, but people don't always see that whole process. And I've only had limited insight into it, but even the conversations I've had with Matt about what other people in the family are going through are eye-opening, because understandably people will look at, say, Rachel lost her life, but the loss and pain continues for these families. From what Matt shares with me, of like people struggling with things, and at times I just can't imagine. I think it's really important to share that out there so people don't lose that heart for every single family that's lost, and that drive to keep finding the truth here and finding out who did this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Matt, we'd like to finish up the show with you. Just let everybody in the channel here is supporting you. They're all wishing you luck, and they want you to stay strong. I don't want to put you on the spot per se, but just tell us what your plan is moving forward, keeping yourself together and keeping yourself focused. We'll keep it a simple kind of thing.
I think my daughter's going to help me keep me focused, because that's something that's been changing the thoughts going through my mind. Up to this point, I've been thinking only about this case and what happened to Rachel, and trying to figure out how to solve it. But learning that I'm going to become a grandfather, I've started thinking about that a lot as well. So I think that's going to help keep me together, because I have one more reason that I need to keep things together, and it's one more area where I need to help my daughter, so right now my plan is to focus on that.
Well, you know what, and that might be good for for a time being too, and get yourself collected again and be able to move forward, because you're going to have to be strong for her and for yourself, because I have a feeling that things are going to go well for this case in the near future too. So you're going to need all that strength and all that desire to keep on pushing forward, because you're still going to have some tough days ahead of you.
Yeah,
and dealing with it.
Not to drag it on, but one thing I'd like to add is it's my sincere hope that we can close this part of the chapter before that next chapter opens. And I do understand that once you catch the guy, there's still a long road ahead, but that's the beginning of that chapter closing. It would be nice to have that starting to close before that other chapter opens.
Well, you know how to get a hold of me if you ever want to talk about things or whatever. I can, give you some ideas too, and that kind of stuff in regards to cases like this, because I've dealt with, unfortunately, many of them. So you can always feel free to chew my ear or pick my brain, whatever you have. I want to thank you for coming out there and showing everybody that brave face that you have, because it's unique. You have that ability to be able to stay strong, and we want you to keep on pushing forward, Matt. Okay.
Thank you so much, Joe. I really appreciate you, your show, and your community.
Thanks for coming and trusting us with your story, because that to me is more valuable than anything else. Tim, I also want to thank you for also coming back and sharing your expertise. All of the videos, and including the one that Matt wanted you to see, whatever, I'm going to make sure that they're posted in the show notes. You guys can come back and see them at any time. And of course, Tim's links are in there too. And make sure you follow Matt on Twitter. I posted his link also in the Nightbot, and that thing has been sharing it. So everybody, hang in there. Matt, hang in there. We're gonna hopefully, he said, sending good vibes your way. Everybody, you guys hang out 1 second. We're going to end the stream. Guys, have a good night. Thanks for coming out and watching.